the worship team members are sort of running on empty. It's really easy to focus on the output. Excellence is visible and urgent. Spiritual growth is invisible and easy to neglect.
Hey, today we're going to have a conversation about a pretty real and honest topic. The fact that we think worship teams in the church today just might be the most spiritually at risk. I know it can sound dramatic. Bear with me. I would ask you to think about these questions that I often ask myself. Is our worship team setting a culture of spiritual discipline and obedience in our church? Is our team hiding from our congregation in between services? Are they sitting in the service, attentive, wanting to learn more about the gospel on Sunday morning? Or are they sitting in the green room, waiting until the next service start time? Again, these questions are not to shame anyone. And frankly, I've been there. I think we've all been there at points in our time in the church. But we can't stay there. We want to solve this. And so today, the good news is we're going to talk about solutions. We're not just going to harp on the problems. I'm Spencer DeYoung from MxU. I've got Justin Greer, local worship pastor, here with me. And we're going to dive in here in a minute on 3 tips that we believe can solve this issue of spiritual maturity amongst worship teams in the church. If you're new around here, MxU is a leading online training platform for churches to use with their worship and tech teams. We do that with a library of 1,000+ training videos and a purpose-built learning management system and coaching for all you churches that have individualized needs. And we love talking with churches every day and helping you solve this issue of training amongst worship and tech teams in the church. And so if you want to learn more about MxU, hit the link in the description below, and we'd love to get in touch with you. But on with the topic for today. Again, Justin, thank you for joining me.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's address the why really quick. Why do we think this problem of spiritual immaturity in worship teams exists, and the slippery slope that I've found myself on before? From your experience, you've been a worship leader for 20 years or so?
Started when I was 18, and I'm 35 now, so someone else will have to do the math.
Okay, so a long time.
Yes.
But you still have a lot left, which is great. Yet, from your experience, why do you see this happening so often?
Man, I've seen every single level of this. I've failed on every level of it, and maybe a little bit of successes sometimes. But so often we get to this sort of season, or you see this where, okay, the music sounds really great on Sunday, but the worship team members are sort of running on empty. And it's really easy to focus on the output of it and just assume that the volunteers are fine as long as they're showing up, right? So Bob Kauflin would call this ugly fruit. I've always loved that term. Okay, it's fruit, but
is it good or bad fruit?
Is it good or bad fruit? So excellence is visible and urgent, right? Spiritual growth is invisible and easy to neglect and really slow, right? So in the moment, it feels really easy to, okay, we need to polish this part. Okay, this transition needs to be tighter. Okay, we need to fix this thing. Okay, the congregation is going to notice this, right? But in contrast to that, a team member's spiritual life is hidden and goes unchecked, right? So it's easier to measure chords and great transitions, right, than heart health.
Yeah.
So I think over time, sort of that urgency of the moment and the urgency of trying to fix a musical thing in the moment starts to crowd out the important part of it. There's a whole bunch of other reasons, but I think that's a huge one for me.
Yeah, well, there's so much expectation now in the modern Western church today around what an experience should look like in the church. So there's a lot of pressure. And so we get it, right? Like we can't undermine the pressure that a worship leader is feeling. Because oftentimes when it comes to setting a worship experience and setting the tone for that, they are the expert in the room. Pastor doesn't necessarily know. Maybe your pastor might not be Stephen Furtick, who led worship for many years, or other pastors out there who have that understanding of maybe a worship experience and how it can be executed ultimately. And so we don't want to undermine that, but it's still a real issue, and we can't stay there. I think a lot of people are like, yeah, this is a problem, and then they stay there. And I'm like, hey, how can we find freedom from this problem? And so that's really the encouragement here, is like, we want to understand why, so that we can know where we need to go. and really assess the situation of where we are today in our ministry. And also, let's just be honest, you can't lead a team where you haven't been. So if you're a leader listening to this and you're going like, this all sounds good, but frankly, I don't know the last time I really made this a priority. Again, no shame or condemnation there. Been there, understand where you're coming from, but let's change it. And that's really why we're doing this today. So, okay, let's move on to, again, there's 3 points here we're going to dive into. We even said this before, like there's probably 100 points out there.
Definitely.
There's a lot of points, but if we were to condense it down to 3, this is what we're going with today. And we think that if we prioritize these 3 things, we're going to see milestones hit on our team of spiritual discipline and health, obedience. And ultimately we should be excited about that. And so point number 1, your team is spiritually starving because you're only feeding skills. What do you think about that, Justin?
Yeah. I mean, all throughout the Bible, you see this theme happen. Okay. God values the heart posture, that inward sort of worship heart more than the outward form of it.
Yeah.
But so often, again, going back to that immediacy, I think so often as well, we, whether subconsciously or consciously, will try to define what good worship looks like, right? And Lord, forgive us for what we've done in the church by saying, okay, it's time to worship now, and then the music starts. Yeah. And then we've sort of, again, consciously or subconsciously taught our people that, okay, this is all that worship is. It's when the music starts to fade in and then when the music starts to fade out. No, biblically, it's about the heart posture inwardly. So musical skill is a great tool to express worship, right? Yeah. But it's not a substitute for any sort of spiritual reality at all.
Yeah. And again, I understand being on a worship team in the church in the areas of tech, playing instruments, singing. Skill is important, right? Bible says to play skillfully. We are called to play skillfully, but at what point does it become about perfection? You know, we say around here, perfection is idolatry, right? Like and so, but excellence is mandated. We are called to we're offering our worship to the Lord. And ultimately, it's pleasing to him. He wants, we're made to worship, but ultimately, and like you said, playing instruments, singing, that's part of the job. That's part of what we do. And that's not just us on the worship team. It's the whole congregation, right? We're all singing together. So we don't want to villainize that. We don't want to villainize skills. But is it becoming the cake, right? Is that really what it's all becoming about? And so, again, you might be only feeding skills. And think about that. And how much time, maybe a good question there is just to consider, how much time in a week are you putting towards resources for your team and getting them all the parts for the songs you're playing, or one-on-ones teaching them how to play that certain guitar part, or whatever it may be, dialing a guitar tone. How much time are you spending doing that versus meeting up with them for coffee and maybe doing a devotional with them or praying with them, or just giving them a call and asking how their week is going? So, or maybe even start a rehearsal with 5 minutes of prayer and scripture, no matter, maybe you're running behind, but prioritizing that time and letting your team know this is actually more important than anything. If we don't get this right, everything else probably not going to be all that pleasing to the Lord. Yeah,
if skill is sort of the means to the end and that's all that you have, Jesus in Matthew 15 makes a pretty huge distinction between that. He says, they praise me, they worship me with their lips, but on the inside, I don't have. That's the JSV, the Justin Standard version, right? But on the inside, they don't worship me, so their worship is in vain.
Yeah.
So you can have all the skill in the world, and I totally agree with you. This is why I love MxU so much. We use MxU, but if that's all that you have, that's not enough. Yeah. Ultimately, it will fail you, right? Yeah. And ultimately, it becomes vain. Yeah. So it's zero worship if that's all that you have. So totally agree. prioritizing community off of stage is another huge part. So that can look like, okay, maybe monthly, quarterly, yearly gatherings with everyone. It has nothing to do with music. Okay, maybe it's training, maybe it's just prayer with your team. One-on-ones, that's my personal favorite, is intentionally showing your worship team that they are more than just what they bring to your team, that you care about them as people, knowing their kids' names, knowing what's going on in their lives. They'll ultimately, prayerfully feel seen and shepherded. And another really great part about it is you'll start to catch some spiritual struggles early on if you make that a consistent part of it. Instead of maybe the possible blow up later, you sort of catch those early on.
Yeah, absolutely. And you start to build relational equity when stuff inevitably will hit the fan. And there's problems. And ultimately, you're going to have that relationship built because your team will know, hey, Justin doesn't just want me around for my skills. He wants me around because we're in this church together, this community of believers, ultimately a faith community that we're a part of, nothing other than that. So ultimately, that's very passionate about that one. Point one, we're only feeding skills. Let's maybe turn that around. Point number two, backstage culture, shaping your spiritual culture. Some of these, again, are a little bit dramatic, so please don't get triggered. Maybe it's not, and maybe you're doing great. We'll get to that later. But
I'm triggered, Spencer.
So backstage culture. Some churches don't even have a backstage. So if that's you, feel free to just skip this section. And if you ever attempted to have a backstage, come back to this podcast and listen. Backstage is not, it's not like you can't have a backstage, right? Every church is probably going to have some sort of backstage where gear is kept, where some churches walk on and off that stage, however it is. But let's talk about this idea of backstage culture.
Yeah. I totally agree with you that having a green room or a green room, backstage room is inherently not necessarily a bad thing, right? Okay, it's a place for the band who has been there for a really long time to sit down for a second and maybe rest for a second, grab a snack, okay? As we're talking about this, to make that point even bigger, is that it's not necessarily about, if you have a problem with this at your church, it's not about, the solution isn't necessarily, get rid of the green room, right? So we know tech people and creatives, right? If there's not a green room, we will find some place to hide. We'll find some place to isolate. We'll find a corner somewhere. We'll get in the ductwork, whatever. We will find some place to isolate ourselves. So it's not about the green room itself. It's about the green room mentality itself. So we're not meant for isolation at all. And actually, biblically, the Bible says that those who seek isolation seek their own desires. So if your desire on Sunday is to isolate yourself, I'm just going to be here for my portion and then vanish. That's the actual problem. It's not the room itself. So creating that culture, we are called to humility, and we are called to genuine care for others. So your band, your tech team, yourself, showing yourself to the people, being visible and available, is so important to the life of the church.
Yeah, that's really good, man. I, from my personal experience, it can be really easy to kind of give yourself a pass. I've been here since 5 a.m. And so, I just need a break. And sure, take a break. But don't let that break become, a resting place for the whole day. And I mean, there's been times where I've gone to sleep in the green room in between services. There's times where I've fallen asleep and didn't wake up in time for the next service. There's many times just in my own walk where I just, frankly, early on in ministry, I paid a lot of attention to CCM, pop culture, going to shows and following artists and kind of seeing how they did what they did. And I think the church has taken a lot of cues from that culture. So green room has almost kind of, for a touring artist, a green room, it is their resting place. It's like where they hide from the crowd, essentially. It's their safe place. They're guarded by security, so on and so forth. And we've kind of taken on this like self-important mindset in the church that we need that same thing.
Yeah.
There's times in the church where I have been around worship leaders. I'm sure I've even said this at times, like, you don't understand how physically and mentally exhausting it is to lead worship. You just don't understand. Like, I'm special, and it's just that mentality can lead you to a pretty dangerous place.
Absolutely.
And then the team picks up on that and they go, oh, where is everybody? Yeah. Oh, they're probably in the green room. I got to head to the green room.
I think that's the biggest point right there is that, so you have to make rules and you have to set expectations here. So again, I'm very naturally introverted. Yeah. I'm not an extrovert at all. I have slowly become, I think it's because of my wife, I have slowly become more extroverted over the years.
Yeah.
But my natural tendency is to isolate myself and to go hide, right? But I've had to set expectations and rules for myself, and I set expectations and rules for the team as well because it's so important. So the rules that we have at North Star at my church is in between services, be in the lobby.
Yeah.
If you're super introverted like myself, bring a buddy, right? Yeah. Just don't make the excuse of, okay, well, I'm an introvert, so I'm just going to let the extroverts go do their thing, and I'm just going to go isolate myself. No. That's not how this works. You have to attend a service. I'm fine if you need to rest and talk during the service that you're not attending.
Yeah.
That's totally fine with me. There's no one out in the lobby.
Yeah.
To eat breakfast, do your thing, just not in between services. And then being intentionally visible and involved, we're part of the family. So we have a rule also at North Star that to be on the worship team, you have to be a covenant partner, a covenant member of our church. Yeah. So there's no one who plays on a Sunday morning who isn't totally involved in the life of North Star. Yeah. So prayerfully, your natural tendency is, okay, in between service, I'm going to go hang out with my friends and see the people of God and commune with the people of God. Yeah. That should be the natural tendency anyways. And when these things happen, people notice it. Yeah. So legitimately yesterday during a meeting, I had the guest services person tell me, hey, I just wanted to highlight one of your volunteers, Justin. I said, okay. She said, in the 11 a.m. service, there was nobody at this door. We didn't have enough volunteers to sort of man this door and greet people as they're walking in. And I saw one of your volunteers see that and walk over and start greeting people. And it's so noticeable by people. And I just my heart just swelled. Knowing that. And then literally the very first time I ever walked into a church when I was 15 years old, a guy greeted me. It was like a youth service, but this was an older gentleman who greeted me. And I was like, hey, how's it going? 20 minutes later, I see him on stage playing bass. And it just, it said a lot to me. That spoke volumes to me that, okay, this is not an us versus them sort of culture. This isn't like the celebrity. Okay, these are the anointed, like perfect Christians, right? These are. I felt like I was a part of something, and they were a part of the same thing that I was in. So it speaks volumes. That mentality. Is it about? Are you indulging yourself and hiding yourself, or are you using the green room as a place to recharge for a second, refocus, so then you can be launched back into being a part of the service? Yeah. Your duty as a worship leader doesn't end when the service ends. It doesn't turn off. There's so much more to the gathering than just your 20 minutes on stage.
Yeah, that's good, Justin. Wow. That's very good. Okay, let's move on to point 3 because I couldn't have sealed that off any better than you just did. You can't expect spiritual growth without intentional discipleship. We talked about this in point 1 a little bit, but we're going to dig a little bit deeper. Justin, our job as worship pastors, some people might not have the title pastor, and that's fine. They might just be a worship leader. But if we're going to call ourselves pastor, and frankly, from my perspective, if you are leading a team as a worship leader, you are in a discipleship role, right? If you call yourself a pastor, you are a disciple maker. You are a shepherd. essentially. That's what the Bible says. So we're going to go off of that here. So is our priority to shepherd our people first? Are we actually discipling them? And what does discipleship look like? And that shouldn't be a mystery because Jesus did it really well, right? Yeah. And so we got to look at what Jesus did, apply that to what we're doing here today, and not let the noise of what we're doing now in the modern Western church, which we do not want to villainize. We don't want to villainize the tasks and things we need to get done, but we need to be very honest about their place, where they fall in line in the pecking order. And so intentional discipleship, how have you failed in this area? How have you won in this area?
I have failed a lot in this area. Yeah. And actually, oddly enough, I'm in the middle of sort of revamping a lot of things and a lot of the ways that I do ministry at North Star. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made coming into this church is assuming that at previous churches, it was like pulling teeth to gather our people together and for them and for our volunteers to want to hang out with each other, to want to live in that sort of small community within the large community. It was like pulling teeth for it. And I walked into North Star assuming that it was the same way. And after some really wonderful feedback and criticism, even just recently, I have found that to not be true. They want to be with each other and they want to commune with each other. They want to be intentionally discipled by me more than what I'm doing right now. So I have already failed at it and I'm growing in it. But spiritual growth and discipleship doesn't happen by accident, right? Just like every Christian, we have to learn how to be more like Christ, right? So we can't assume that our band members are just going to magically absorb Christian maturity by osmosis just from playing on a Sunday. It takes day by day, ongoing, life-on-life process, consistency to help our people be more and more like Jesus. So there's a lot of things that you can do. Again, we mentioned earlier like the monthly, quarterly, yearly gathering together outside of the worship service. I love to do things that have nothing to do with music. Yeah. Okay, maybe it's prayer, maybe it's something like a barbecue or something like that. We're gearing up for that right now. I think the key word is consistency. Yeah. Small but regular investments in your people, in the spiritual growth of your people eventually add up. Yeah. One of the biggest it's so hard to measure success in like worship and creative ministry. Okay, what's the success of our worship services? Okay, how many people raise their hands? Okay, that's not a good metric. Yeah. So one of the best ways that you can measure success in your ministry is how you use your budget. Yeah. So this year, 2025, we adjusted our budget and took away some things so we can add it into weekly food. That's I heard someone say this, like the key to discipling your people, or one of the biggest keys, is meals. Yeah. Meals. Yeah. You see that all over the word. People gathering together, being discipled and growing up, and it's all centered around eating, right? So have more room in your budget for coffee and meals, one-on-one check-ins, things like that. Showing up and listening to your team members and to your volunteers and just being in their lives speaks volumes. Yeah, man. That's really good. Praying for one another. One of the biggest ones, and this is something this is sort of our life verse, or our mantra here at North Star. This is Hebrews 13 through 15. No, sorry, 15 through 16. Through him, then let us continually offer up a sacrifice of praise to God. That is the fruit of lips that acknowledge his name. One of my favorite verses on worship, right? The fruit of lips that acknowledge his name, sacrifice of praise. Okay, this is worship. But it doesn't end there. This is verse 16. Do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God. Okay, so I'm not satisfied with only doing half of what God calls us to do in worship. The other half is doing good, and maybe it has nothing to do with the worship service. I want to be known off the stage as well. So one practical thing that you could try is find opportunities to serve together as a team, missionally. Go maybe partner with your missions person at your church and find ways to serve together. I've read this in a marriage book. We're not married, but there's a relationship there. Those who serve together stay together. Anyone who's ever been on a mission trip knows that one of the things that I always come back with from a mission trip is not necessarily the work and the people that I met there. That's always amazing, but how close you grew together as a team. The people that I went on the mission trip together, it changes you like in a big way. Serving together does something to you. So find ways that you can serve together with your team. That's a really simple way to start growing closer with each other. And intentionally disciple each other.
That's great. Man, that's really wise. I as we were talking about that, I was thinking about some of you listening who might be going, okay, I have a team of 50 people or 100 people. I can't possibly disciple that many people. And you're right. Like Jesus Christ had 12. Mm-hmm. So discipleship is hard and messy. And like you said, it's life on life. It takes vulnerability. It takes time. It takes a ton of time. So yeah, you can't disciple your whole team, but you can create a culture of discipleship. Mm-hmm. And if you're a leader of a team, some practical tips might be, if you have a team of 50, you better have other leaders on your team. That's a bigger issue. If you're the only leader, then you are kind of working uphill for a while until you can figure out who are your leaders. Who are the ones who are going to actually be a part of making other disciples, right? And that's the whole model that Jesus set, right? That's how we have the word today. That's how, that is the foundation of really how we got here, was that Jesus discipled people, right? And how we know his story and how we have the gospel. And so all that to say, maybe pick your 12. Who are your leaders? Maybe you only have 8 leaders in your team right now, and you're like, 12, that sounds really exhausting. I need to start with maybe 2, 3, 4. But like write their names down and like actually put discipline in practice and hold yourself accountable. Tell a leader of yours, somebody who's maybe discipling you, mentoring you, hey, these are the people that I really want to prioritize in my ministry, in really discipling them, and set that culture so then they can go and disciple others. And that doesn't stop you from, also leading gatherings and things like that. But the expectation is not that you're having one-on-one coffee with every single person on your team every week. It's just not probably realistic. You maybe could once a quarter, and there's ways to get creative there.
The more that this becomes a priority in my life, the less I agonize and over the Sunday worship experience itself, which then creates more time for me to do this. And but to your point, totally agree. I can't do everything. So finding, I like to think of it as like some sort of mentorship pipeline, right? Yeah. A seasoned member of your team, and maybe a newer member or a younger member of your team, and you're the one who plays Cupid, right? Bring them together. Hey, give me the receipt or something like that. Utilizing your team members, which then builds trust between you, and it's just it's a win-win.
Yeah, that's great, man. Well, to close us out here again. Skill is important. We talk about skill and excellence just about in everything we do around here at MxU, but spiritual health is what sustains us. That's ultimately what we're called to as a son, a daughter of Christ. Before we pick up a guitar, who are we? Where is our identity? Are we seated with Christ? If so, then let's be obedient to what his word says and walk with him and let our lives be a reflection of that. And so all that to say, we're so grateful that you joined us today. We've talked a lot about how skill and executing what we need to execute in worship ministry can oftentimes get in the way. That might be because you don't have efficient processes in place for how you train your team or how you prepare for the weekend in all the things that need to get done in scheduling and in getting parts out to musicians and so on and so forth. That's why we do what we do at MxU. That's why we're so passionate about streamlining those processes with you. And so if you're like, yeah, I don't have time to get around to all these things you guys are talking about, maybe check your processes, maybe check your training program that you have in place for your volunteers if you have one. And so check out MxU. Again, we're so passionate and we're shameless about telling the world about it. We have invested our life's work thus far into building MxU for this purpose so that we can raise our ceiling and go be disciple makers and do much more than just play the right parts to songs and turn the knobs the right way. So with that too, we have a free resource we want to mention. We actually have a devotional. It's a 30-day devotional that we'd encourage you to run through with your team. If you're at this place where you're like, I don't know where to start. You guys are talking about devotionals. I haven't led a devotional in a long time. Again, no shame there. That's why we've put this together so that maybe you can start to put some of these practices in place with a little bit of help. And so check out that free resource. It's made specifically for worship and tech teams, and we're super excited about it. Other than that, man, thank you for joining us. Please comment with any questions or thoughts, wins, failures, if you'd be so vulnerable to share. Like and subscribe as always. We appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next time.